So one of the things that I was trying to figure out, and this is before I became Christian, and I don't remember if I was an atheist or spiritual at this point. But there were people who thought, oh, God must be the God of the Bible must be evil if he's sending people to hell. And I was like, well, let me think about this. And I came up with a thought experiment that made it make sense, that didn't require that God be bad, for that outcome to occur. And so what I sort of came up with was like, oh, imagine if when you died, you experienced how you made other people feel throughout your life. If you were a terrible person, that's probably not going to be like a great experience. That might feel like hell, especially if you've done something like Adolf Hitler, or equally heinous things to a lot of people. That probably would intensify that hell experience. And if you were a pretty good person and you did right by folks, maybe you have a more heaven experience. Or like, let's say you're a child, and so you haven't built anything up really yet. You're probably gonna have a different experience. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So you could have, God had put, has a process, and the people sort of have self-determined which direction they're going based off how they made people feel. Now, I don't think that's how it works, obviously, because now I'm Christian. But to me, that was sort of the first thing that fell into place for me to understand that potentially, God wasn't like a terrible, evil deity, as a concept. The other thing I noticed was that people actually they don't mind punishment. They don't mind vengeance. They don't mind a person that they don't like or they think is wrong. They don't mind that person experiencing eternal damnation. They just objected to a deity that was doing it, who had rules that they don't agree with. So I was like, one, I figured out a way that it would make sense, and wouldn't require God be evil. And two, people don't seem to mind that anyway. And also, just on a side note, when I've tried to figure things out, like, oh, who's right or who's wrong in a historical situation, so many times it's like, oh, you've gone back this far, then you go back another 50 years, then you go back another 50 years, another 100 years. And it's often not as straightforward as you think, especially if there's some long-term conflicts, historical conflicts over a specific area, like Jerusalem. Anyway, it's like, oh, I someone's perspective on this may depend on where they start their particular timeline of thinking who is the aggressor, who's innocent. Um, so people don't mind. They don't mind punishment. They just think that it should be distributed usually differently. Or they want to be the one to give the punishment. The other thing I was going to say is that I have actually had encounters with the Lord, with God and his Yahweh aspect, with God and his Jesus aspect. One of the reasons why I became Christian is I started having like fully more real than reality dreams. I still remember the first one I had, and I started writing them down because I was like, what the heck is this going on? And so, my first dream that I had that was like this, that was more real than reality, was I was sucked into a void and I was surrounded by lightning. And I came over time to understand, oh, I was in the presence of God's power, maybe. But I was terrified. It was incredibly scary. I mean, so scary. And I called out to Jesus in my dream, or whatever it is, vision of the night, I guess. And yeah, I called out to Jesus and that didn't help. And I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. And I did the only other thing that I could think of, which was to say the Lord's Prayer. And that made the lightning stop. And I was like, oh, I have research to do. I need to figure this out. Because there's nothing like being sucked into more real than reality 4D plus experience to make you really reevaluate your belief structure. So anyway, one of the dreams that I had prayed about the issue of abortion, which is going to be a different video. We're not doing that now, because I've had multiple, and I had always thought of abortion as being a good thing, especially for women who are trapped in abuse dynamics. It had been something I had recommended to many, many, many victims of abuse. Don't get stuck in this situation. Have an abortion. So anyway, I got around to like, well, did I mess up on this? I had another ultra 4K, more real than reality, 40 plus dream, where I was in the presence of God and I was fully self-aware. There was nowhere to run in my mind. There was no way to justify. I was fully aware of everything I had done and how wicked it had been. Like that, I much prefer meeting Jesus in my dreams. Let me just put it that way. He's like the best person you've ever met. Yahweh, obviously, yes, he is. But it was terrifying. And so I suspect that when we come into the presence of the Lord, after we've passed, if we're lucky enough to, I guess, that you are fully aware. You are fully aware of everything wrong that you have done. Probably everything right you have done. I just, I did those things, and there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide. You yourself, with that self-awareness, you feel the anguish. You feel the feelings around the truth of what you've done. Like God is ultimate truth. And so when you're in his presence, there is no, oh, well, this was my experience and my perspective and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, it's ultimate truth, total self-awareness. We luckily get the opportunity to take our medicine while we're alive, where we go, oh man, I did this wrong. I'm so sorry, God. Can you forgive me? And it's in this much gentler way than what happens after you've passed. After you've passed, if it's probably not going to be a good time. So anyway, yeah. We are trying to figure it out from the other side, from the position of life. We're trying to reach into the spiritual dimension, these other dimensions, trying to reach God. And thankfully Jesus, he came into our 3D, our 4D world so that, we can have like a personal experience with him, and also that he can help us, because we've not made our best choices much of the time. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.